Hey everyone, this is Curb and I bring you yet another standard game. Today we're going to be featuring another new lyrical deck from Festival Booster 2023, and of course that is going to be Clarissa, played by myself on the right. Once again, I have tasked myself with the duty of playing all these lyrical decks that would not get featured unless I play them myself. So today we're testing out Clarissa, a deck that I actually did try out when it originally, or I built it I should say, when it originally came out, but of course I have not actually played it since then, so I decided to give it a little bit of a whirl now that it does actually have its new support. And of course it is going to be going up against probably the worst possible thing, which is Gandeeva, you know, big threat of the meta of the set, I guess we can say. Although we do have BT11 just around the corner, so we'll see how well Clarissa can do against the most meta deck in the format. So we are going to be swinging just the 8k. Of course, Gandeeva doesn't usually do anything until it gets grade 3. We are going to be hitting that with an OT to pass. They are going to be hitting a front trigger, and I believe this is a little bit of a different Gandeeva build where my opponent is opting to play a bit more front over the crits. But we'll see how that kind of plays out. So we're doing pretty good so far. What you want to really be doing against Gandeeva is just guarding early so that those big attacks are much less powerful once you get into their grade 3 turn. Of course, it can be swinging for 15 because Clarissa does get an extra 5k whenever she attacks without any rear guards on the board. Now, but actually not getting any regards is going to give my opponent that free ride, but that's pretty typical. We are just going to be taking this attack, hitting into a draw trigger, so we're going to be able to get another card to our hand. And now we're going to be riding into our grade 3 Clarissa, kind of just deciding what we want to be discarding. I believe I actually have 2 copies of Aim to be the best idol, so we're going to be pitching 1. So I do actually opt to play the new Clarissa in the ride line, and then I play some copies of the original in the main deck. As we're going to be seeing, normally I would want to see a normal Clarissa by this point because I can pitch it in order to add the Aim to be the best idol. We're just going to be swinging at the Vanguard, hitting into a nothing and a nothing. Our opponent OT to pass that, or 2 to pass I should say. Basically just there to try and get that on hit and kind of keeping my board a little bit clear so that it can't be retired to Gandeeva, because I can't really play around Gandeeva the way I normally would. I do need my rears. My rears are very important in Clarissa. Gandeeva is just going to be proccing skill for free off of the grade 2 of the ride line. Thanks to me not calling anything and actually adding cards off of my ride line, I do have quite a few cards in hand, and I am at 1 damage going into this next turn. So we are going to see Gandeeva obviously with the skill, but we still do get to bind 1 and draw 1 since we did retire 0 rear guards. So kind of just thinking about how we want to use that 1 counter blast that we do have. So the good benefit of having that on hit is that it kind of kept Gandeeva from taking that 2nd damage. But as we're going to be seeing, Gandeeva doesn't always really need that much damage, as we do see the grade 2 coming on down, and then the grade 3 coming on down as well, binding the grade 2 that just use its skill in order to bind a card from drop and draw another card. So thanks to the fact that I didn't call any regards out to the board, Gandeeva does already have its draw skills live. We're going to be seeing a 26 at the Vanguard with the multi-attacker boosted by the counter charger. A very typical play in Gandeeva. We're seeing the counter charger being used here, counter charge, and then using the Aleph Car to bind itself with a counter blast, checking the top 5 and calling 1 down. So checking that top 5, looks like we don't have the greatest of choices. We have a couple of good options. I see the grade 1 and I think a couple grade 2s. Looks like we are going to opt to go for the grade 3. Probably not going to want to use its skill, because that means we do lose out on an attack, even though we do get an extra draw. So this Gandeeva swing for 25. I'm thinking I'm at 1 damage. I can afford to go to 3. Maybe I'll get some defensives, and I'll be able to take these other attacks much easier. So I'm going to opt to not guard this attack. So my opponent is going to do their drive check. Drive check 1 is going to be a critical. That's pretty unfortunate. And drive check 2 is going to be another critical, which is going to be also unfortunate. But thankfully, from these 4 damage checks, I am going to be getting both a critical trigger as well as a heal trigger. So I'm going to be at 33 for the rest of this turn, and I am only going to be at 4 damage. So my opponent is going to be swinging for 35, which unfortunately still hits. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to give up one of my combo pieces because I do actually need the Earns Corrects. But I do have some extra copies in my hand with all those cards in my hand, so we should be fine going into this turn. And I do have the Persona Ride, meaning that I can Persona Ride, and this is looking to be a pretty powerful turn. Probably going to be setting out all of my rear guards, using the Clarissa skill to Soul Blast 1 and search the deck for that aim to be the greatest idol and adding it to our hand. So now I do actually have to start doing some things. I was actually left with a pretty good board, which is those 2 grade 3s on board. So with Carissa's, or I should say the order skill, I am going to be able to actually attack into him, and he has no way of getting them off board before I do that, because they don't have intercept, which is definitely something you have to consider when you are playing around with Clarissa. You have to consider if they're just going to intercept, because sometimes you do have to attack with the Vanguard first in order to stop them from doing that. But of course, that is also a double-edged sword, because you do have restanding rear guards, as we are going to be seeing here. We're using the skill of the new card, the what's her name, Nixella. You counterblast 1 and put her into the soul. Your Vanguard gets the skill that if you played the aim to be the strongest idol, when your Vanguard attacks, you can restand one of your rear guards. So we are looking to be having 5 attacks this turn. Clarissa is definitely going to hit, so that other grade 2 is going to be able to restand on its own. So of course we are going to be starting off with the Evelyn, swing for 23. Not the greatest number, but you know, it still does hit. It's calling for a 15k guard, so it is not the worst. Almost forgetting to swing with the grade 2 there for 25, calling down another 15k guard. Swinging the Clarissa for a very nice 28, restanding the Evelyn, attacking all front row units. So obviously you're probably not going to be guarding this. Drive checking 1 is going to be that Evergreen, Eversphere, or whatever it's called, and the second check is going to be a critical, giving the critical to the Vanguard, and then an extra 10k to the other rear guard. But unfortunately, first damage check ends up being that over trigger, meaning that all the effort I put into this turn is going to go to waste. I do thankfully get to use the Clarissa skill. New Clarissa skill lets you draw 2 cards and then give all of your units an extra 5k. But Gandeeva is going to be starting off with that best harvest, which is deeply unfortunate as we start off with the Gandeeva skill. Checking the top 5 cards of the deck, retiring my entire column, but thankfully my opponent did make a little bit of a misplay where he didn't target the Leona, which means I can actually Soul Blast 1 and discard a card in order to add one of the cards that was retired from Rearguard Circle back to my hand. Of course, I am going to be adding that Evelyn, because Evelyn can actually just search out all of my pieces, and so whatever gets retired this turn, I am going to be able to just call back out another copy of whatever I need. We do see my opponent not actually opting to go for anything. We must not have enough combo pieces to retire the board, so it looks like we're just calling down a critical trigger, and we're just going to be swinging with that. But still a pretty decent number. 33 is not really anything to sneeze at. But we do kind of have to debate. We are at 4 damage, so we actually can't take this at all. So we're just gonna meet it with a perfect guard, just discarding I think an extra or just a critical trigger because it is not a combo piece. Drive checking 1 is going to be a heal trigger, which is not going to activate, and drive check 2 is going to be another heal trigger. So very unfortunate for my opponent, but very fortunate for me. We got 2 heals out of the way, and both of them were completely wasted in that situation. So unfortunately, I don't have another Persona Ride. The other Personas are just hiding inside of my deck, and I'm probably not going to be able to see them. So I'm going to have to deal with doing kind of a mediocre turn here. Also, without a Persona Ride, I can't get back the aim to be the strongest idol, meaning that this turn is going to be even worse than it originally could be. And of course, it does get even worse because I call out the Evelyn, which I added back, only to find out that I don't actually have any more copies of Earns Correct in my deck that are not already the ones that are on board. I have drawn into everything except my other copies of that grade 2 and the grade 1. So I'm going to be calling out this grade 1 just to boost the Vanguard to make it easier for this attack to hit, because what I want to be doing is getting those double draw, and I'm going to be flipping over the top 2 cards and hitting into over trigger. A huge debate here is whether I should give the 100 million to my Vanguard or my rearguard, because the rearguard is going to be swinging twice. I could push 2 damage, but what I opt to do is actually just give it to my Vanguard, because if I do give it to my Vanguard, that means I get the Earns Correct or leader. What's her face? Why did I forget her name? Clarissa skill, meaning I get to draw an extra 2 cards. I do waste the 100 million, although technically I do break through the shield, so it's not complete waste, but I will have those 2 more, or yeah, 2 more attacks because this is going to be standing, and they are still going to be swinging for 15, which is not great. Does get hit by a 15k guard just because we probably want to keep the combo pieces, and then a 28, which is a very nice number. Hitting 2 Persona Rides into the damage zone, which is very, very nice. We're seeing the Gandeeva skill here used. Picking the correct cards this time, the grade 2 and the grade 1. Flipping over the top 5 cards. Of course, we are going to be hitting onto both of those. Or actually just the grade 2. I think we missed the grade 1. Using the, I think her name was Leona's skill, once again to Soul Blast and ditch a card in order to add that card back to my hand, because I do want to keep as many earns correct different names as I can. But of course that does enable the Gandeeva to bind 1 and draw 1, and then of course we do bind another one since we retired a rear guard. Calling out the copy of the Alfquar, the multi-attacker, calling this other grade 2, opting not to use its skill, probably wanting to save the counter blast for the multi-attack, because of course it looks like we don't actually have the counter charger, which is going to complicate things a little bit for my opponent. But we are still swinging for 30k at the Vanguard with that 10 bind zone. So I am still at 4, so I can afford to take 1. Going to be using the Evergreen Transsphere in order to pump myself up to 38. The Vanguard is going to be swinging using the Alfquar's skill. It is going to bind itself face down, checking the top 5 cards of the deck, and then calling 1 from among them. Looks like we did manage to get the DE Cycle card, but of course we can't use its skill because we don't have any more CP. Not that it would be super optimal, considering that we don't have a full column right now. So this Vanguard swing is going to be hit with another PG, checking the drive check, a Best Harvest, and another Best Harvest. So that's looking actually pretty good for me, because those are 2 cards that have 0 shield value, meaning that it's going to be that much easier for me to actually try and close out the game, I should say. But looks like we are swinging with the Cycle card first for a nice 32. I am deciding that I should probably just take this hope for defensive, and thankfully I do hit into it, and the best kind of defensive in this situation, a heal trigger, which is actually going to proc, healing me back down to 4. And so now this attack becomes that much more guardable, even though it is still pretty big. What is that? 18 plus 22, that's 40. Guarding with, I believe, just 20 makes me up to 43. So using the grade 1 skill, we did bind itself face down and draw another card. And I think I missed that on my face down bind total, so oops. Anyways, I do decide to do a very questionable play here. I have the copy of the old Clarissa, so I decide to actually just go straight for the Persona Ride. Sure, I do miss out on some of the skills, but I think at this point I managed to draw into another aim to be the greatest or the strongest idol, so I'm going to just ride into the old Clarissa, trying to use the Evelyn skill once again, thinking that I can use it now that I don't have the grade 2, but of course I managed to draw into my last copy of the grade 2 for turn, so I will not be able to use that Evelyn skill. Instead, I'm going to be using the multi-attacker skill to give myself extra multi-attack, and there is the aim to be the strongest idol. So I am going to be swinging the Evelyn first. Thanks to the Persona and the extra 5k, the double intercept would not be enough, so I wasn't really scared of my opponent going for that. Now, I did have to debate whether I wanted to swing with the other grade 2 and give him the opportunity to actually just double intercept, but I decide I would rather not, so I'm just going to be swinging with the Clarissa at the entire front row, which is just going to be met by a PG. And we are actually running down the Gandeeva's cards. I believe those 3 cards on the table are the Best Harvest and Persona Ride, meaning that my opponent only has 2 more cards left to guard with. The skill of Clarissa is actually going to be giving my other 2 units an extra 5k. I did hit into another heal trigger, healing down to 3. So my position is getting actually not terrible, swinging this first rear guard for a nice 43 at that Vanguard, thanks to the extra 5k and of course the trigger, and the other swing is going to be for a 38. So I probably should have swung the 38 first, but they are actually very similar guard values, but that was a little bit of a misplay on my part. I really should have just like 38 and then 43 just to hit much better numbers. But we do see Gandeeva starting off with a Persona Ride. Things are not looking great for me. Thankfully, I am at 3, so this might not be as bad as I think it is. I still have a decent amount of cards in hand. I did draw 2 cards off of the Clarissa because I did get 2 hits, even though the Vanguard was perfect guard. We do see the copy of the Best Harvest used, and then the Gandeeva skill is going to be used, actually using that last CB. So if we don't have a counter charge, I don't actually have to worry about any multi-attack. Of course, hitting both of those, the grade 2, the entire column, off of the Gandeeva skill, which is pretty typical. Most of the time you will hit everything that you need. So just going to be doing that, binding 2 more cards face down. I think we should actually be at 14 because I missed one of those cards that got bound, unless I am mistaken about that grade 1 skill and it just retires itself, but I'm pretty sure it binds itself face down. I'm sure you guys would love to correct me in the comments. But anyways, we do see a draw of 2 cards. Looks like we drew into double critical trigger, which is super interesting. But unfortunately, we do have the 1 copy of the counter charger. So looks like we will be able to at least do 4 attacks this turn. And then looks like we are going to be calling down everything, triggers included, going to be doing everything in our power to close things out this turn. And there's definitely the huge possibility of that actually happening, as this first swing is already for a 54. Now, I do have quite a few cards left in hand, and I am at 3. So like I said, it is totally feasible for me to live through this depending on what my defensive checks are. But it is still very much in the air. And to be honest, I'm pretty surprised Clarissa has even gotten this far against Gandeeva. So as we take our damage, it is going to be a critical trigger. So Gandeeva's skills are absolutely massive, but just having that extra 10k does matter a little bit. So we are going to see the Gandeeva swinging, using the counter charge skill to counter charge, and then using the Alpha Car to counter blast once again, checking the top 5. I'm really hoping my opponent doesn't see a good card off the top, but unfortunately we do see the grade 3 coming on down. So that's going to be a pretty strong attacker, 23k base, along with the extra, right now it's currently extra 30k that it's getting, is a 53k column. Although I think it should be 55 right now. And we do see the skill procced to bind the trigger that is actually boosting the Vanguard. So we do lose out on an extra 5k to the Vanguard swing, but we're already swinging for 57, so it doesn't really matter that much. So going to be PGing because I thankfully somehow still have PGs at this point. Drive chain to a Best Harvest and a perfect guard, which is a little unfortunate for me, but you know, it is what it is. Right now I should stay focused on actually surviving this turn, so I can take 1 more damage. This next swing is going to be for a 59, so I'm going to decide, just calculating everything. Both of these, I think my calculations is both of these guards are going to be the same amount of shield, but if I get a I have enough to actually guard one of these, so I do live. But I decide that if I bank on a defensive, if I hit that defensive, I can conserve cards in my hand and actually maybe do something next turn. Whereas if I just try and hard guard the first one and take the next one, I'll lose out on more cards. So I opt to just take the first one, and I get another defensive trigger, meaning that I will actually be able to conserve quite a few cards in my hand by guarding, by committing just as few, by banking on that defensive. So it did actually pay off. I'm going to draw for turn, and I only have 3 cards left in deck, meaning that this is undoubtedly my final turn, unless I just don't swing with Vanguard, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, might actually be a decent position. I could just call down rears and just beat at the rears, but unfortunately for me, I don't really have the greatest rears. I am going to be using the Evelyn skill, just kind of check what's left in my deck. I think I have 2 copies of Persona Ride and a trigger in there, a critical trigger, which is deeply unfortunate because I really would have loved to have those Persona Rides like 15 turns earlier. I'm just gonna be starting off with my Vanguard, calling down my entire hand, the Leona behind the Evelyn, and then just the last PG that I drew into, banking on hitting that trigger so that the PG can hit. This is going to be, I think that's like a 2 to pass. Drive chain into Persona Ride, and then a heal trigger, so healing back down to 4, but it doesn't really matter. Gonna be swinging at the Vanguard for 16, and then another 16, gonna be met with that PG. So we were 1 card away from actually closing out the Gandeeva, but of course at this point I have 1 card left in deck, so my opponent just has to pass, and I will just lose the game. So that's really going to be it for this match. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed seeing Clarissa do things for once. But that's going to be it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you in the next one. Don't forget to always do things.